Hello, hello, hello! Thank you for joining me for another Sunday Afternoons with Reverend Lucretia. I'm so glad you're here. And if this is the first time that you've come to this station, I'm so glad you found us. I hope that you find it to be inspirational and uplifting and that you get information that can help you see things in a different way. So, welcome. If you want to click on the button to subscribe, then you will be able to get new videos. We do come out with new videos every week. So the name of today's talk is Look Up Child Right Now. And the song is Look Up Child by Lauren Daigle. If you'd like to listen to the song before you hear the talk, just go ahead and click on the link. It will be down below in the description. So we're going to be talking about stop thinking about whatever it is that is troubling you and change your focus and start thinking about God instead. We'll talk a lot about the Golden Key, the book that was written by Emmet Fox. We'll be talking about the Indwelling God, Lessons in Truth by Emilie Cady, her chapter on bondage or liberty. We will be talking about how hope can change your life. I've brought back the hero story. We have a wonderful hero story by Amy Downs. We're talking about the fact that peace and serenity come from the knowing that God is with us always, and it is not dependent on any material circumstances. As often as humanly possible, take your eyes off the material world, those things that you can smell and touch and feel, and put your focus on the spiritual world. So we're going to start off by talking about this incredible hero story that I have. The woman's name is Amy Downs, and it's called How Hope Can Change Your Life. She reminds us that back in the days of Aristotle, there was another philosopher named Epictetus, and he said, it is not what happens to you, but how you choose to react to it that matters. And she wants us to respond with the power of hope. So in 1988, she had flunked out of college. She had flunked out twice, actually, of the remedial math class. That's the class you have to take before you can even start taking credit classes. She flunked out twice. She said, as it was, she turned out that she got a job as a teller for a credit union. And she worked in the federal building in downtown Oklahoma City. And so, yes, we'll be talking about the Oklahoma City bombing that took place on 4/19/95. She said it was a beautiful sunny day. She had met with her friends downstairs and said hello. She had a very good friend named Sonia who had a beautiful yellow power suit on. There was a business meeting, and back in those days they told you to wear these powerful colors. So she had this bright yellow suit on, and they were all laughing about that. They were all happy, and they were having a good day. She was just starting off her day. Her desk sat in front of the big glass windows. And then the bomb went off. She said she heard a roaring in her head. There was this powerful sensation of falling, this rushing sensation. There was screaming all around her. It turned out that she fell 3 floors. She was upside down, still in her chair, buried in 10 feet of rubble when they found her. Her right hand was sticking out, but everything else was totally covered by the rubble. She said she thought she had died. It got very, very quiet. She couldn't feel anything. She tried to open her eyes, but everything was black. She said it was very hard to breathe, and then she heard these sirens, and she started screaming, help me, help me. When she did breathe, she breathed in this very strong, acrid smell that burned her throat. She laid there for 45 more minutes, waiting for them to come. She heard voices. They were looking for the daycare babies, and that was very concerning to her because the daycare was on the 1st floor, and remember, her office was on the 3rd floor. They called out and asked her how old she was, and she said that she, in fact, wasn't a baby. She was 28 years old. And they said, we have a live one. We have a live one. And they kept talking to her, and then they were able to feel her hand. And then there was all this yelling. There's another bomb. Everybody get out. Let's go. Let's go. And she heard their voices saying that. What they told her was that they had to go out to get more equipment to be able to get her out. But she'd already heard the voices saying that there was another bomb. She lay there, buried alive, thinking to myself, I'm getting ready to die. Her life started flashing before her. She started thinking how she had not really lived her life. She was filled with so much regret. It was overwhelming. She prayed and she begged God for a second chance. She was filled with sorrow. She started to sing church songs. She said, it took my mind off of what was my situation. It was the only action I could actually take was with my mind. How I thought to pray and sing these church songs, even though the situation did not change, I felt peace. They came back. They worked to get her out. It took 6 hours for them to get her out. The building was very unstable. They had to stop every 20 minutes to determine whether or not it was safe to even keep on going, but they kept on going. Finally, they said, we're going to pull you out and this is going to hurt. She said she didn't care if it was going to hurt. She just wanted to get out of there. She remembered looking around and just thinking, this is not real. This couldn't be happening. I couldn't believe my eyes. It looked like we were in a war zone, like something from a movie. They put me on a gurney and took me out of the back of what used to be the federal building. The beautiful spring morning had changed, and it was dark and gray. It was cold, and it was starting to rain. She took her first breath of fresh air, filled her lungs, and she promised she would never live her life the same. She didn't know about any of her injuries or any of her friends. She just knew that if she had a second chance, she was going to take it. So it turned out she was in the hospital for 8 days. She found out one by one that 18 of her friends, that co-workers, had been killed. In total, 168 people died. They found the body of her friend Sonia in her yellow suit. Cars were driving around the streets with their headlights on to show a symbol of hope. And she remembered thinking, somehow we will get through this. So the credit union was in the federal building. It was their only location. They lived there rent-free, and so she wanted to keep it going. Over half of the staff were gone. The few that remained were traumatized. She said somehow she felt if we survive, if this credit union can survive, then all of the memories and lives of my friends were not lost for anything. So she was asked by the CEO a question that she said stayed with her for the rest of her life. If you had a magic wand and could do anything, what would you do? What would you do to grow and have the culture come back to being a positive and thriving one? Given the current situations and the current limitations, what are the smallest steps that you can take? She said she was excited. This gave her hope. She read the book, Hope Rising, How the Science of Hope Can Change Your Life. And they define hope as the belief your future can be better and brighter, and that you actually play a role in making it better. She went back to school. She got all of her credits together and started school all over again, and she actually got a degree. She graduated with a leadership degree, and she said that her confidence in herself was through the roof. She then went back and got a master's in business administration. She went from being a teller to being a CEO. When all this happened, she was 355 pounds. She started riding a bike and losing weight. When she turned 50, she became an Ironman. That means a 2.4-mile swim, a 112-mile bike ride, and a 26.2-mile marathon within 17 hours. She said she came in last, but she didn't care. She came in. She said she used the simple framework, always an action that you can take. Instead of focusing on what you can't do, focus on what you can do. Even when she was buried alive and facing death, there was something she could do. Remember, she was singing the church songs and she was praying. And she remembers that thought, if you had a magic wand, what would you do? Start taking some steps. Given your current situation and your current limitations, there is always something you can do. So we're going to talk about Scripture. We're going to talk about what they say about putting your focus on God, changing your focus. Philippians 4:8. Finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Psalm 121, I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. Psalm 16:8, I keep my eyes always on the Lord. With him at my right hand, I will not be shaken. Isaiah 26:3, you keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you, because he trusts in you. 2 Corinthians 4:18 says, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. And Proverbs 3:5, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your path. And we're going to be talking more about not leaning on your own understanding. So The Golden Key is a very well-known, it actually wasn't a book, it was only about 15 pages. It was a pamphlet that came out, written by Emmet Fox. Emmet Fox lived 1886 to 1951. He was a divine science minister at the Church of Healing Christ in New York City. He also wrote the Ten Commandments and the Sermon on the Mount. Most people know him for the Sermon on the Mount. He was a very good friend of Charles Fillmore. He was also a very good friend of Alcoholics Anonymous. His secretary's son was one of the key founders of the meetings in New York City. So the book was printed in 1931 at the height of the Depression, of the Great Depression. He said it was a practical guide for getting out of trouble. God is omnipotent, and we are made in God's image and likeness, and we have dominion over all things. In scientific prayer, it is God who works and not you, and so your particular limitations or weaknesses are of no account in the process. You are only the channel through which the divine action takes place, and your treatment will be just the getting yourself out of the way. We've talked on other talks about how we get in our own way so many times. All you have to do is this: stop thinking about the difficulty, whatever it is, and think about God instead. Do not try to form a picture of God, which is impossible. God is wisdom, truth, and inconceivable love. Your object is to drive the strength of the thought of the difficulty out of your consciousness for a few moments at least, substituting for it the thought of God. Each time you find your attention wandering, switch it back to God. Do not try to think in advance what the solution will be. Leave the question of the ways and means to God. Letting go of the problem is a kind of denial and release. To consciously invoke the presence of God changes everything within you at that very moment. It raises your vibration to that of the divine. It allows you to be open and receptive to the living spirit of truth and become the vessel through which the energy, light, and presence of God may pour itself into and through you. That's by Reverend Sylvia Sumter. Be open to receiving guidance, insights, answers, and directions. Reverend Dale Worley wrote, "In using the Golden Key, rather than thinking about God, it helps me to consider contemplating God instead. I ask myself questions such as, what does it mean that God is present, everywhere, all the time? Do I really believe that God is within me? What does that feel like?" By asking open-ended questions, it keeps me focused on the divine. Reverend Elizabeth Longo said, "Since I began this journey up in spiritual consciousness, I have discovered that God's timing is different than my timing. But I have learned not to be deceived by appearances when my good hasn't yet materialized. Plant the seeds in your consciousness. Have absolute faith that things are working for the highest good. You wind yourself often to see with your spiritual eye and not to be fooled by your senses." So we talk about that all the time. Don't see the results immediately, and then we default to the sense consciousness. We lose awareness of the vast ocean of possibilities. Tap into the feelings of joyful expectation, and the universe responds to your feelings. You can affirm things like, "I know that my heart's desire or something better is on the way." Stay present in the moment. Remind yourself that the past no longer has any power over you. Remember that everything is working out for your highest good. Reverend Paul John Roach said, "The Golden Key shifts our consciousness from limited options to the unlimited expanse of spirit-centered life. We don't have to know how this works. Allow the greater good to unfold." Albert Einstein said, we know this quote, "No problem can be solved from the same consciousness that created it." So when you're focusing on God, you're switching your consciousness up to the spiritual level. Breathe, calm your mind, and heart center yourself so that you can see the options. You can rise above fear and doubt, and the answers will become available to you. Putting God first is the spiritual practice that was established in Scripture and is written about over and over and over again throughout the Bible. So Emilie Cady, I've been reading her Lessons in Truth again. She has a chapter called Bondage or Liberty, and she talks about where you put your focus. And she says, each soul is by nature in bondage to the flesh, to the material world. Suffering is the result. The history of the children of Israel coming out of Egypt symbolizes the human consciousness growing up out of the reliance on the material world to the reliance on the spiritual world. Somewhere along every human journey, man comes to a place where they've grown from the animal, physical reality being the dominant theme to understanding that the spiritual self, the Christ self, is the most important. Each soul must learn to stand alone with its God. Nothing else will ever make you master of your own destiny. There is your own indwelling God. All the life and health, all the strength and peace and joy, all the wisdom and support you can ever need or desire. No other can give to you as can this indwelling Father. He is the spring of all joy and comfort and power. Before we were helped and comforted by others, we received joy from outside circumstances. All joy, strength, and good now comes from the knowledge of the indwelling God. Nothing that anyone does or says or fails to do or say can take away our joy and our good. The ultimate aim of every soul should be to come into the consciousness of an indwelling God, and then, in all external matters, affirm deliverance through and by this divine one. So here's what I know. Look up child right now. There's two parts of it. There's the look up child part and there's the right now part. I believe with all that I have that what we focus on dictates how we feel. I took a week off from preparing a talk to focus on things that really matter to me, like I prayed, I slept, I spent time out in nature, I went to the retreat center that I love going to so much and hung out there in the desert. I went back to the lake where I like to go and spent time there in the outside. I took long walks. I was walking in my community one day. We have a community of about 400 homes here, and I was walking around in my community. I was relaxed and I was happy and I was at peace, and I looked up and I saw this massive purple swath going across the sky. It was not a bush. It was tall. It was way higher than the rooftops. It was past the rooftops with thousands of purple flowers all the way up there. I've never seen it before. Look up, child. I reflected on how much beauty is around us that we never see. I thought about the news, the war, politics, financial stressors we are all under, looking for the new pay the rent job that I have now, and about the move that I'm getting ready to make. I thought about how we really do have a conscious choice every single moment of our lives of what we are choosing to focus on. I thought about how I lived here for 8 years, and I've never seen that purple tree before. I wondered what other miracles I had missed while I spent my time working and worrying. Reading Emilie Cady's book again is so powerful. She talks extensively about how God, the good, lives inside us every single time we need him, every single moment, every single time that we're looking for strength, God is there. There is a progression in us. And as we grow spiritually, we come to the understanding that when we are young spiritually, we look to the material world for all the answers. We are consumed with the need to be in control and the need to figure things out. As we mature, we are able to see that God and the matters of the heart and the spirit are what really count. She says nothing anyone says or does or fails to do or say can take away our joy as we focus on the indwelling God who gives us peace, joy, and protection. As we grow, we become better at understanding that the difficulties in the outside world can be lessened when we change our focus. We heard Amy Downs talk about being buried upside down in 10 feet of rubble, and she prayed and sang church songs and never gave up hope. She made a commitment to value every moment of her life if given a second chance. And here we come to the right now part of Look Up Child right now. Right now, we are fine. Right now, we have roofs over our head and food to eat. Right now, we have people who love us. Aside from praying and being out in nature, I spent time with friends. I visited some I had not seen in months because they live so far away. I spent mornings and afternoons with friends who live close by, but we have been too busy to see each other. I focused on people and friendship and love and grace. I thought about health and home and family. I realized right here and right now I have a job, several as a matter of fact. Money is coming in, bills are being paid. I live in a beautiful home which has brought great joy and comfort. I came to feel in the depth of my bones, no person, place, or thing can take away my peace and serenity, and that no person, place, or thing gives me serenity. Peace truly does come from the ability to feel the power and the presence of God. We have a stronger awareness of God in our lives when we take our eyes off the material problems and stresses and focus on the God, good, omnipresent, indwelling force that lives inside us every single moment of every single day. You are only a thought away from peace, joy, and love. Take a moment. Look up, child, right now. And so it is. Remember, at all time, the power is in you. It always has been, and it always will be. I'd love to hear your comments on how you are able to change your focus, how you're able to hold on to hope, how you realize that as we grow spiritually, we rely less and less on the material world to give us our peace and joy and serenity. I send you on your way with many blessings.